All right, today I wanted to talk about politics in stories. And what I wanted to talk about this aspect is why I've seen a lot of people talk and make videos, YouTube videos, and everything like that, talking about why they hate politics in stories, which for some people it may seem confusing because you'll have certain stories like Bioshock, which takes Ayn Rand's objectivism and takes it to the extreme, or with a bunch of drugs under the sea and everything like that. And it's just literally just it's all about it has politics all throughout it. You have House of Cards, which is literally just a political show. Um Game of Thrones is medieval politics, all these are shows that are dripping with politics. So what is it that people actually mean when they say they don't like politics in games or politics in movies or anything like that? Now, there is a specific brand of modern politics which most people are trying to identify or point out or talk about, and I'll touch briefly on that. It's not as exciting for me from there, but the main aspect and dynamic I want to talk about is this concept of the moral line. Now, a moral line is an idea where in stories, a lot of times they're exploring moral quandaries. You have this idea: is it better to save one person and let 100,000 or 1,000 people die? This is a question that you may come into. In The Last of Us, we have a question that Joel, the main character, comes up to, where he has this girl who he's basically adopted as his daughter, and she is kidnapped by these people they're going to create a drug that's going to potentially save humanity, but she'll die. And Joel doesn't want that, so he stops that from happening. And immediately, if I tell you that, it's like, well, that seems kind of selfish. But if I start at the beginning of the story and tell you this, I think you'll change your mind. Because what happens is Joel is going about his life and he loses his daughter. His daughter dies. He's unable to save her and she's murdered in front of him. And it's really this harrowing scene that we're talking about, where it comes up and she is out. She's out of there. From there, and then it kind of fast forwards into the future, and he's going along and he's going about as a smuggler in America, which has fallen into an apocalyptic scene with these kind of fungal zombies. If you all have played the game or seen the show, you'll know what I mean. Fungal zombies, but everything's falling apart. It's apocalyptic, and it's a wonderful, incredible story. And he comes across this young girl, saves her, and you really begin to see this bond with this girl named Ellie. And he helps raise her, protect her, and even though they're kind of at odds, you can really begin to see this aspect where he sees her as his daughter, and he's doing all of this to protect her from there. And then they go through all this. They're going through this entire journey where they're trying to keep her. She's getting kidnapped. She's, in danger. She has to, she's attacked by cannibals. They're having to have friends who are getting infected, and they're having to watch them die or get killed. It's all this harrowing stuff. And Joel has gone through all of this just to keep her alive because he failed to save his daughter. And so now he's got to try and succeed in keeping Ellie alive. And this is the dynamic that's going on. And so if you start off with that dynamic, then when you get to here, you'll understand a little bit more. This is understanding where this is coming from. So this is where morals and morality come into question, because it's not immediately obvious that saving all of humanity is worth killing, a girl that you love, that you see as your daughter. But this is what the story is. And so this is what it is. The moral line is what you'll do is you'll have a character, a character or character A, and they will have some beliefs or actions, and they'll come up here. And then what you'll have is you'll have some sort of antagonist that'll come up against the other way, And as you'll see, what will happen throughout the story is this line will form in terms of what you want and what character A wants, what the antagonist wants, and this is where the conflict happens. This can be over morality. There's a gazillion ways this can play out, but it's not immediately obvious, where all of this plays out. There's a lot of weird morality that can come into play. One aspect is Hannibal Lecter. And what world is a cannibal the good guy? Well, in one, when there's a man who abuses children is there, and we have this hierarchy. That guy who murders people is actually not as bad as the other guy. From here, and so you have this aspect. I think it's the second one, when this one comes into play, or a serial killer. Buffalo Bill from the first one, The Silence of the Lambs. It's not immediately obvious to us that one serial killer is better than another. But it turns out we kind of begin to feel and understand and explore this line. So this is it. And then what you're doing is you're presenting the audience with two choices. This is the aspect. We're deciding here or here. And this is where a lot of stories really enjoy, because they really try, they try to take this away from your classic good guy, bad guy, and they try to make it more gray and then grayer or something like that, or gray, the anti-heroes or anything like that. And you're really exploring and pushing this aspect to see. And what you're presenting with the audience is two choices. This is the two choices. Who are you going to root for? Because the audience is going to root for someone. They're going to get pulled in. Something like that is going to happen. And this is how it's going to play. So what happens, though, to go back to our point for what it means for politics in stories, is what's really happening is what happens if the audience, when they're presented with these two choices, what if they reject it? What if they say, nope, screw all y'all, I'm out? And this is where I think this starts to happen more and more. And it can happen in different affairs and different reasons. And it begins to feel, this is where it kind of feels like the writer, the story is trying to force you to like something, force you to want something. And the way they'll do it is they'll do it kind of what I said, is you'll have a character and they'll do something like they'll save a kitten or a puppy or a woman from a fire or a man from a fire. And what they're doing is they're establishing this as a moral person. This is someone we'll trust with morality. They make good decisions. They're a good guy. We've identified them as a good guy. And then they're going to say something. Maybe they'll do something. I feel like I've seen a lot of movies. You can kind of pick which example, and especially if you go back in time, you can kind of see older movies or older stories, written stories that can go back hundreds of years, where they'll have this understood morality, and it'll kind of hit you out of left field because you're like, this is not at all the morality that I understood. I remember there's a fairy tale where there's a woman who her husband was believed to have died, I think, and she goes on, and at some point she gets remarried, and turns out the husband comes back after 20 years. It wasn't Oedipus or anything like that. It was something. It's the same vein though, and she's horrified at herself that she has moved on. And I think she kills herself, or she is shamed by this. And I'm like, listen, it's been 20 years. She didn't remember what you look like. Move on, bucko. But this is a different moral system. This is a different understanding. And so what you'll have is you'll have a character that then does this, and then maybe they'll do something that you don't agree with morally. This is one aspect where I've seen it more recently. There's a lot of these female power movies or anything like that, and you can go back in time and kind of pick them. You can pick these kind of cheesy action hero movies where it's very much the man kind of treats everyone like objects, and he's just so much bigger, large. He's basically the sun, and everyone else is kind of revolving around him as just objects in his orbit. You'll have various aspects of this. So don't take any one example that I'm getting and say, this is what he means. This is what this. What I'm trying to do is just explain why people seem to react viscerally to some, and even if they're irrational, even if all these people are rational and crazy, why is it that some people got insanely crazy about certain movies, like maybe the Ghostbusters remake, or let me see, some of the Marvels, or what was it, the the one with Brie Larson. I can't remember whatever her movie was, her superhero movie. There's some people that got absolutely went insane, but then you have Bioshock, and everyone's like, "Yep, that's fine." The Boys season 1, particularly. I think the later seasons are getting a little bit touching on some noses from there. But The Boys season 1, I loved it. There was very rarely anything that people were crazy about, except for the fact that it was so violent, and that was basically all anyone talked about. And then how Anthony Starr is just beyond phenomenal. From there, but anyway, so let's say this. So let's say in some of these movies, what they'll do is they'll have a character will do something good, but then they'll maybe make a choice that the audience doesn't agree with. They'll make a stand. They'll make a moral, they're drawing this moral line here. And then they'll have a character over here who disagrees with them. And I disagree because I'm sexist, because I'm racist, evil, or anything like this. So what we're doing is we're presented with a character here, and I disagree because I'm this. And so now the audience is beginning, and maybe this is a statement that the audience believes is false. And so we're having a character who's set up to be a good character going up against somebody who says, I'm obviously a villain. And so what they're doing is there's this feeling that, like, well, if I disagree with this person, then that means I agree with this person. And, shoot, that's horrible. I don't agree with any of that. And so what you have then is you have this rejection. And this happens a lot with political movies, but it's not necessarily, I would argue, strictly related to politics. And I'll get into the aspect of The Last of Us 2, which became hugely controversial for the treatment of some of their characters and some of the choices that they did, to where some point where the fans who were diehard fans and still are diehard fans of The Last of Us 1 cannot even stomach The Last of Us 2. And, what's going on? What is causing this? And this is kind of what I wanted to focus on. And so what it is they're just rejecting the whole dynamic from here. They're not saying that this is not, I don't accept this. I just don't accept this at all. You're setting me up, and I know you're setting me up. And this is where it kind of begins to feel, where some people would describe it as propaganda, because I'm meant to agree with this one, but I believe it's false, and I'm going against it. This is really painfully felt in comedies, because what's happening here is you have, the character who says something funny, ha ha ha, it's so funny, and it'll have an antagonist who's maybe, or the butt of the joke, and the audience is like, okay, who are you going to side with? Are you going to side with a jerkwad who's just, he's just the worst? The guy who is the butt of the joke, this is your antagonist, the jerk, the evil boss, anything like this, or the joke is funny, and this is why it can be so painful sometimes to watch certain comedy movies, because it's like, this is not funny, but I do hate this guy. This guy is just absolutely beyond, evil or something like that. You absolutely hate him, but then what do you do? What is the audience to do? Like, this is not funny. This is where you get the whole moments of, I can't watch this. I can't do this just because it's so painful. You even have a word for it when people are talking comedies are actually painful to watch because of this disconnect. We're set up to agree with one of these two, and we'd rather just stop watching altogether than pick. This is the moral dilemma. And this is what you'll see in some of these movies where you just keep an eye out for it, wherever it feels like you're like, oh my gosh, these people, there's a perfectly reasonable reason why this character is wrong, but nobody is telling them, And again, I not to pick on anything, but you'll see some of these. I feel like there is a modern flair where you have a female character who is, we're established. She's a good person. She's moral. She's upright. She's strong. She's genuinely a good character. And she's going up against a bunch of male leaders. And what's interesting is she could be wrong, but not for all the reasons that these people, because these people are despicable. These people are absolutely despicable. Like, I understand why she's disagreeing, but she's also equally annoying or disagreeing. And this is where you can run into these weird questions where you're trying to figure out exactly why people may dislike a show or a character. You have Rey from the new Star Wars movies. What do we think? We have Galadriel from Rings of Power. You have a few of these characters. And again, not to pick on anyone in particular, but you have this aspect where maybe the character is wrong, but in the story, they're presented as obviously this is, or maybe, let me see, probably a better one would be like Enola Holmes or something like that, where you have very much, it's supposed to be a girl power movie, which is great, fine. I don't, do your thing. I still think Annihilation is the best girl power, if you want to call it that, movie of recent years. I think it's absolutely phenomenal. From there, or any of the Studio Ghibli movies, Nausicaa is probably, in my opinion, one of the best feminist or female characters that's been created in a long time. I think she's absolutely astounding and absolutely incredible of a character. But what you have here is you'll have this where people don't like this character. They don't like it. We saw a little bit, you could argue if this was justified or not with Legend of Korra, where people did not like Legend of Korra. I kind of hated everyone. It wasn't just Korra. I just disliked everyone except for Asami. She seems somewhat normal. So if they got rid of everyone else and the story was about her, then, maybe that would be fine. But you'll see this, and this is what is happening, is the audience understands that, hey, I'm meant to agree with her, but I do not. I'm meant to agree with this character, but I do not. And again, don't feel like I'm picking on anything modern right now, because if you go back years in different books and stuff like that, you'll read some of these and you're like, I really get the feeling I'm supposed to look at this lady who remarried 20 years, her husband who's been gone for 20 years. I really feel like I'm supposed to dislike her, and it just kind of the story didn't work. And it's like, understandably so. Like, it's been 20 years, bub, of course she's moving on. She had you counted for dead. And then the last example, or the next example that I wanted to talk about, is one where it was very controversial, which is The Last of Us 2. And again, what we're talking about here is we have this whole question of Joel. Joel is not really a good guy. He's not really paired up as a good guy. He's not supposed to be a moral, upstanding character. He's no Captain America or anything like that. He's a man. He's a weak man, but also he has his own morals. He's also going to do whatever it takes to keep Ellie safe. And we can see that from what happened to his daughter. His daughter died, and he failed as a father to protect her, and he's not going to make that mistake again. We're not going to let that happen again. And this is what will happen. She has that potential to save all of humanity from what's going on. And Joel makes the decision, doesn't tell her, and says no. And you know what? I got it. I understood. Maybe if in the moment, that's the other thing, is in the moment of the story, I agreed with him. Maybe I, given time, but I was caught up in the emotions. I was just like, absolutely, that's your daughter. Don't let these filthy scumbags get her. Or anything like that. And that's what you can have happen in the story. When you present it in a certain way, and you write it in a certain way, you can have characters that'll do this. And so what you have happen in the second one, you have a character named Abby, who Joel actually rescues. And it turns out the surgeon who's going to do the Save Humanity and She'll Die is Abby's father. And in the beginning, fairly early on in the beginning of the story, she beats Joel to death. And then the story largely is about Ellie going on a revenge quest against Abby. But one of the things that I think fans rejected so much is they seemingly tried to make Abby a main character and set her up as a character, or a good character. Not necessarily a good character, but just as good. Let's put that. Just as good as Joel. Just as good as Joel. And this is where I think everyone had this problem, is they rejected this. They said, nope, no way, this is not working for me. And I think there was a way to make this work, because I kind of see what the authors were trying to go for, is they're trying to show just Joel from another perspective. Imagine there's a Joel 2 out there, and in order to save Ellie 2, he has to kill Joel 1, and that's what they're trying to present this. The problem is they were really successful on selling the audience on Joel, even though, he wasn't necessarily the most morally upright guy. We understood his decisions, and the reason why is because they give us a lot of time. There was a lot of time and story development that went into creating this. And what you could have done perhaps is tell Abby's story, and then, tell Abby's story, and this is the point where she kills Joel, and then this is Ellie's journey to go get Abby and revenge, but you tell them simultaneously. So basically both things are happening at the same point, and you don't realize that it's Abby who's killed Joel, or that these are different timelines. This would be the coolest thing, because in this one, Ellie and Abby, I think, actually work together in certain aspects, and it would be one of those great plot twists to a degree to have done it that way, where you don't realize it's the same timelines, and this will give you time to understand Abby's point of view. Because what happened is, when I went through it, I mean, it's been a good while since I went through the story, but when I went through it, I was just like, yeah, I'm not buying this. I don't agree. I ain't buying it. This isn't for me. And when you have that, that's where you get this really strong visceral rejection that characters will have with it. And it's something that, I don't know, it seems like nobody was really able to point out or really see, because they were kind of calling it all kinds of other stuff. But anyway, so this kind of covers it and kind of hopefully identifies what I'm trying to do when trying to talk about is this different aspect of stories. You have comedies, you have where it feels like propaganda, if it's political. It feels out of touch if they're just picking the wrong characters or something like that. You have all of these dynamics that are in play and audiences will have a visceral rejection or acceptance, mostly just rejection in this context from there. So yeah, I think that covers it. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next one.